and today we are going to be creating a snacky sack. You will need 3 pieces of fabric for the outside of your bag, 3 pieces for your lining, a zipper, sharp pair of applique scissors, some tape, your choice of applique fabrics, and your vinyl. And now it is time to run your first step. Now that you have finished running your placement stitch, it's time to lay your zipper down, secure it with some tape, and run your tacking stitch. Once your zipper is tacked down in place, it is time for the folding stitch. You can remove your tape. We're going to start with the bottom top panel fabric. You're going to want to face that wrong side facing down, line it up with the bottom edge of your zipper, and tape in place. Once you have your first layer of fabric secure, you can go ahead and flip your hoop over. And you're going to take your lining bottom panel, face it wrong side facing down, and again line it up with the bottom edge of your zipper and secure it in place with tape. Now it's time to run your folding stitch. So now that our folding stitch is complete, we can go ahead and remove the tape. You're going to pull your fabric back towards you, finger press, and tape in place. Next, you're going to flip your hoop over. You're going to remove your tape. Bring your lining back towards you, pull it nice and tight, finger press, and tape in place. Your next machine step will be the tacking stitch for your lining and your top bottom panel. And now it's time to run the placement stitch for your vinyl. Okay, so now that we have finished running our placement stitch for our vinyl, it is time to place our fabric down and run our tacking stitch. We can remove our tape. Grab your vinyl and lay it on top of your placement stitch. Be sure to cover that completely. And we're going to hold our vinyl in place with a couple pieces of tape. And now it's time to run your tacking stitch. So now that we have finished running our tacking stitch for our vinyl, it's time to remove our design from the hoop, and we're going to grab your sharp pair of applique scissors, and we are going to trim away our material. All right, so now that we have our vinyl tacked in place, what we're going to do is we're going to remove our tape and grab your sharp pair of applique scissors. I have mine here with my little rubber grips, and what we're going to do is we're going to flip our hoop over. So we are trimming the back material of our applique, so our vinyl window will have a nice little peek through. So now we are going to take our scissors, and you can also use an item such as a seam ripper to kind of score your fabric to help you trim easier. So what you're going to do is you're going to trim the inside of your tacking stitch close to the tacking stitch line. Now that you have finished trimming, the only layer you should have left is your vinyl window. You can go ahead and remove your tape, flip your hoop back over. You're going to trim your excess vinyl around the tacking stitch on the front of your design. Okay, now that we have finished trimming our applique, it's time to run the embroidery portion of your design. Now, something that we recommend as a little tip and trick for this project is using a monofilament bobbin. This will avoid showing any bobbin colors you have throughout your project. For this tutorial, I am going to just stick with a white bobbin. So now we can go ahead and move on to the embroidery. Okay, now that we have finished running a portion of our embroidery, it's time to run the placement stitch for our animal. In this case, it will be the bear body. And now that we've finished running our placement stitch, it's time to remove our design from the machine and add our applique fabric on top of our design. Now, once you've established what color applique you would like for your animal, you're going to want to place it right side up on top of your placement stitch. Be sure to cover that placement stitch completely. And then we're going to use a few pieces of tape to secure it in place. Once we have our fabric secure, it's time to run the tacking stitch for our applique. Now that your bear has been tacked down in place, it's time to take a sharp pair of applique scissors and trim away all excess material close to the tacking stitch line. And now that we have finished trimming our second set of applique, it is time to move on to the placement stitch, where in our case, it will be the face for the bear. Now that we have finished our placement stitch for the head of the bear, it's time to lay our fabric down and tape it in place. Run your next machine step, which will be the tack down stitch for the head of the bear. Now that we have finished the tack down for the head of our bear, we're going to go ahead and remove our design from the machine and trim away any excess applique to the tacking stitch line. And now that we have finished all of our appliques, it's time to finish off the embroidery process for this project. Alrighty, now that we have finished our embroidery for this project, we're going to move on to the folding stitch for the top panel and the top lining panel. So the first thing we're going to do is grab our top panel fabric. We're going to place that wrong side facing down and line it up with the top edge of our zipper. You're going to secure that in place with some tape. And we're going to repeat the process with our lining. So you can go ahead and flip your hoop over. Grab your lining. Lay your fabric wrong side facing down, lining up with the top edge of the zipper. And hold your fabric in place with tape. Okay, and now that we have finished running our folding stitch for the top portion of our bag, we're going to go ahead and remove our design from the hoop. We're going to pull our fabric forward and finger press and tape in place. So you can go ahead and remove your tape. Finger press your fabric forward. Grab your tape again. Now this tape is really nice because it can be reused over and over again throughout your project, so you don't need a fresh piece of tape every time. And once you have your front panel in place, you can go ahead and flip your hoop over and repeat the same process with your lining. Once you have your fabric secure, it's time to run your next machine step, which will be the tacking stitch for the top panel of your bag. All right, and now we are going to pull our zipper to the halfway point. And we're going to move to the next step in our project, which is tacking the lining. So what you're going to do is you're going to flip your hoop over. You're going to take your lining piece, place it face down. Be sure to cover all of your tacking stitches completely. You're going to use your tape and tape it in place. Run your next machine step, which will be the tacking stitch. And now that we have finished running the tacking stitch for our lining, it's time for the last step in this process, and that is attaching our top panel. Now that we have finished attaching our lining, it is time to take our top piece and place it directly over the tacking stitches. As with the lining, be sure to cover your tacking stitches completely. And now that our fabric is secured in place, it's time to run your last machine step, which will be the tacking stitch for your back fabric. All right, and now that our design has finished running, it's time to remove our design from the hoop, trim, and flip. Now we can start by removing our tape. And you can go ahead and pop your design out of the hoop. Now that we have finished trimming out our design, it's time to flip your design inside out. So we're going to use this little opening down here to pull our fabric through. And now to finish off the rest of your project, you're going to hand stitch the bottom of your bag closed. And when you open your zipper, you can use a seam ripper or a pair of scissors to trim out your no-show mesh stabilizer. Now, I really appreciate you guys for joining in with me on this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and had a great time. I would love to see what you guys come up with for your snacky sack. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.